Okay, it's Nick Dutch back on the camera yet again. Today I want to discuss the concept of God. And yes, it is a question of discussing the concept of God, not a question of discussing God per se, because it's my personal position and my point of view that God as a objective entity cannot properly be contemplated, and one certainly cannot accept models of the world which regard God as being something which is an objectively existing thing. This is primarily because of one thing which I believe to be a fallacy, which is held by people of Orthodox religion. For instance, let's say the example of the creationists. They start with the presupposition that there is this thing called God, and this particular thing has certain properties. Now, my point of view is that this thing called God is in fact a concept that individuals use to affect and modify their behavior with the passage of time, to affect their perception of their position in the world, culture, provide an explanation for death, and a wide variety of other things. Due to the complexity of the universe and the complexity of life, no matter what, if God does exist as an individual, independent entity, or presence, or consciousness, or whatever the heck it is, we would have to say that any concept of God would have to be, by its very nature, because it is a gross simplification, completely and utterly wrong. However, people who are theistic still accept the concept of God no matter what. There are those who accept the concept of God in a non-changing, rigidly fixed manner, and I would say that these people are doing something which is wrong because they are not taking into account the possibility that they themselves may actually be wrong and are making a big possible mistake. And this is due to complexity. The complexity of life, the complexity of DNA, the complexity of our bodies, of our brains, of the atmosphere, the ground beneath our feet, the stars, the galaxies, the whole black hole, quantum universe, quantum theory of gravity stuff that Stephen Hawking was talking about, and so on and so forth. The vastness of even the physical world is almost beyond human comprehension, let alone something such as the concept of God. So that's why I maintain that the concept of God is something which grows with individuals with the passage of time. Obviously, when people are very small, when people are children and they're in school, they're given a concept of God which is incredibly simplistic. By the time one is older, one is an adult, one has a more complex, more evolved, so to speak, concept of what God actually means, of what the universe means, and indeed what religion or religiosity means. So does that prove that God exists? No, it most certainly does not. If anything, it proves that any concept that we can have of God must be by its very nature incredibly limited. Even if we've studied theology throughout our entire lives, and we've studied other people who studied theology throughout their entire lives, we will still be no closer to the full and thorough understanding of what God is by any circumstances at all. However, people still believe in God, and even those who don't believe in God may still have a concept of God which they may still use to modify their behavior and indeed explain their place within the universe, possibly because even someone who is not theistic may still have some concepts which derive from a theological perspective which may still do them some good, and therefore even some people who are not theistic may indeed still have some aspects of their character, their nature, their behavior, and the way that they live, which could still be regarded as being semi-theistic. But note, I say semi. So, why do people talk about God? Probably because they don't understand the concept. They never will be able to understand the concept, and the concept itself is beyond human comprehension. And maybe it's the fact that the concept of God is beyond human comprehension which makes it so important. Because humans need to reach for and aspire to something which is better than them, larger than them, and gives them a sense of belonging in order for them to feel whole. Maybe this is just part of the nature of humanity. If someone professes not to believe in God, or indeed does not act as someone who believes in God, they may still have some form of theism still somewhere inside their psychology. So therefore it is probable that there are people who say they don't believe in God, who probably do to a certain degree have some belief in a concept or some understanding of a concept, even if it is just academic, that is used to somehow modify certain aspects of their behavior or cognition. Just a few thoughts for today.